Okay, it's late, but I promised y'all last night that I would talk about my concerns about SCOTUS potentially gutting the rest of the Voting Rights Act. And I'm glad that I waited to film this video until now because in today's What's the Plan call through Indivisible, they addressed this question, this concern. Now, obviously, SCOTUS hasn't ruled yet, but based on oral arguments and also John Roberts' decades long-standing desire, it seems as though the court is poised to strip back yet another section of the Voting Rights Act that could result in between 19 and 20 congressional seats flipping from Democratic to Republican. That's specifically because the guardrails will be off when it comes to partisan gerrymandering. This will be depriving Black voters in the United States of representation in a way that is just going to be absolutely devastating. And I've been really concerned about this. I talked about this months ago when we found out that SCOTUS was going to take up this case. So I got all up in my head yesterday a little bit. I went to a pretty dark place. For me, it's very much the things that the uber conservative six are doing to undermine the Constitution in their fervent, I would say almost frantic desire to hand over constitutional power to Donald Trump and to turn him into a king. I know that I'm not an attorney, but I do not understand unitary executive theory. I mean, I understand what it says. I do not understand how any scholar of the law, anybody who understands what the founding fathers intended or what is in the Constitution could in any way support unitary executive theory. It makes no sense to me. But, elections have consequences, and people didn't want to hold their nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. And folks were like, yeah, that doesn't have it has lasting consequences. It has lasting consequences. The actions of the super conservative six have really been devastating for American democracy. They have tremendously undercut so many checks and balances and just handed over buckets and buckets of power to the executive. And it seems like here, the ruling could disenfranchise millions of Black voters, allowing Republicans in especially a number of southern states to gerrymander the shit out of their congressional maps. They haven't ruled yet. And so I was feeling pretty bummed out about this, pretty frustrated, because I think if we look at all portions of our government, SCOTUS is the least likely to bend to public pressure, right? They have lifetime appointments. They can kind of do whatever the fuck they want. Republicans in Congress are not going to impeach them. They're pretty untouchable. They live in their own little bubble. If you don't think that they live in a little bubble, you should go listen to some of the recent interviews that Amy Coney Barrett gave on her book tour. So as I'm looking at this potential looming devastating SCOTUS ruling and thinking okay, what do we do now? Because I'm never somebody that wants to be gloom and doom, tell you some really difficult, hard news, and then be well, we can't do anything about that. There's always something we can do. Every action of the government creates an opening for us to react, either to create a backlash effect or to adapt our strategies and try something new. I want to give a shout out here to Amanda's Mild Takes. Go watch her video on this subject because I very much appreciated that she went over the realities of the situation and then ended with okay, here's the open door. Here is the place where we have influence. Her take is very similar to what I was thinking, which is that, okay, if SCOTUS decides to strip back this portion of the Voting Rights Act, that will open up the door for already gerrymandered states. Because really, there are no red states in the United States. There are heavily gerrymandered purple states where especially Black voters have their voice suppressed heavily. We should ask ourselves why it is that Democrats have been so vocal for so long about having nonpartisan panels or commissions to create congressional maps, and Republicans really, really want to gerrymander the shit out of their states. Because if they don't, then they'll lose. They'll lose control. Because those states are purple or even blue. It's just that they are so gerrymandered, so a bunch of crusty old white men can maintain their death grip on power. Okay, before I editorialize more. So what we have, if this ruling comes down as bad as we think, is that now these states are going to have the chance to gerrymander. And what do I always say? Our power is hyper-local. Where do we have the greatest amount of influence? Where can we use our voice to enact the most change? On a state and local level. And that is exactly what Amanda said, and I love it when we agree because she always has good takes. So as I am reading through the various lawyers' takes on the oral arguments, I'm just thinking okay, we can't do much about SCOTUS on a federal level, but we can do a lot right where we live. Actually, what we can do is organize on a state and local level to create massive public opposition to gerrymandered maps. If we want change, we have to do it right outside our back door. If we want to prevent the devastating consequences of a stripped back Voting Rights Act from being implemented in these states, then we got to get out the effort really hard to get involved in state and local politics. We have to make sure that we have a massive get out the vote movement, that we primary the shit out of folks who do not stand up and vigorously oppose redistricting that has partisan gerrymandering, that we make sure that Democratic elected officials, they are loud and proud about nonpartisan commissions to redraw maps and that they call out corruption and gerrymandering. And then we discussed this today a little bit in the Indivisible What's the Plan call, and I thought Leah had such a great response. So someone said, okay, Voting Rights Act, is it game over for democracy? We could lose 19 to 20 seats. And I'm sure by now y'all know what I'm going to say when someone says, is it game over? Are we all cooked? Is this the end of everything? Is this the apocalypse? Every action that they undertake creates a chance for us to act in response. Every action that they undertake gives us a space to create backlash against the regime or to adapt and create new tactics. We can be innovative, y'all. We can be innovative and tenacious. So what Leah said is that if this devastating ruling comes down as we think it may, we need mass pushback and political backlash in every state that wants to gerrymander. She said, when you redistrict for partisan gerrymandering, you break up safe Democratic seats, right? And then you spread those Democratic voters out in red districts. But that then adds blue dots into every red district. It makes every red district less solidly red. When you choose to gerrymander the way that these guys want to, it can backfire by making all of those red districts far more competitive because you have now shifted blue voters into those districts. Right? Redistricting is a double-edged sword. When you gerrymander, it also incentivizes blue voters to get out and vote because they're pissed at you wanting to deprive them of representation. Leah went on to say, we have to turn out in massive numbers over the next few months. That will help avert this crisis. Because if there's this huge, massive opposition all over the country, especially in red districts, I know it can seem like really big protests in Portland or, Chicago or New York or LA, like those are awesome. It's those smaller protests that are happening in red districts, especially in red states. That sends a strong message to Republicans that Americans in their district are pissed off, that the resistance is everywhere. There's another aspect here that we really need to consider. Leah said SCOTUS thinks that they can do whatever they want without any political consequences, right? They have lifetime appointments. That they can take away voting rights. They can implement their terrible unitary executive theory plans. So we are watching lower courts consistently side on the rule of law and with the people. And yet we watch SCOTUS time and time again be blatantly biased toward Trump, toward their unitary executive theory. And SCOTUS's approval rating is at an all-time low. They are pissing off the electorate who understands the game that they are playing. Every time that Trump's 6 on the Supreme Court rule in his favor, they are further decreasing the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. At the same time, we are seeing increasing calls for massive court reforms, including term limits, expanding the court. It's clear to the American people that the court has been captured by Donald Trump and MAGA, and it is now functioning in an entirely illegitimate way. We, the people, have the power to call for massive reforms on the Supreme Court. And we need to be pushing Democratic elected officials to take up that position. Like, oh yeah, SCOTUS, super fucking corrupt. They're in the pocket of MAGA and they're not interested in doing their job to uphold the Constitution on behalf of the American people. So what we need is radical Supreme Court reforms. Your Democratic elected should be calling for that. And if they're not, you need to explain to them why that is a popular winning position to take. And I think we should be encouraging Democratic primary candidates to tell us what they think about SCOTUS reforms. We need Democrats talking about it right now. Because as Ezra said, it's never game over. They make their moves, cool, we get to make our counter moves. And they need to be savvy, they need to be strategic, and they need to be tenacious. You want to try and subvert democracy via the Supreme Court? Well, let's restructure the court. We've done it in our past. Mexico's done it. Those fuckers think that they're untouchable. No, this country belongs to us, the people. You don't like them gutting the Voting Rights Act? Then it's time to demand big changes on the court.